The morning alarm echoed through the dormitory halls of the Galactic Military Academy, a sound that had become as familiar as breathing to the thousands of cadets who called this place home. Among them, walking with quiet steps toward the mess hall, was Cadet Sarah Chen. To anyone watching, she appeared unremarkable. Average height for a human, dark hair pulled back in regulation style, uniform pressed and spotless like every other first-year cadet. The academy buzzed with activity as representatives from dozens of species moved through their daily routines. Tall blue-skinned Altarians discussed quantum mechanics in their melodic language. The reptilian Vorthon cadets practiced combat formations in perfect synchronization. Crystalline Zilari floated past, their bodies shimmering as they communicated through light patterns. In this diverse environment, humans were just another species among many, neither particularly strong nor exceptionally intelligent compared to their galactic neighbors. Sarah took her usual seat in the back corner of the mess hall, her tray containing the standard protein paste and synthetic vegetables that kept cadets functioning. She ate methodically, occasionally glancing up at the massive viewing screens that displayed academy announcements and news from across the galaxy. Today's headlines spoke of border skirmishes with the hegemony, a militaristic alliance that had been testing the boundaries of civilized space for months. Lieutenant Commander Vex, a stern Altarian with pale blue skin and 4 arms, entered the mess hall and scanned the room. His eyes settled on Sarah's section, and he made his way over with purposeful strides. Conversations quieted as cadets noticed his approach. Officers rarely visited the mess hall during standard mealtimes. "Cadet Chen," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had seen real combat. "Report to Administrative Office 7 immediately after morning formation. Bring your personal identification codes." Sarah looked up from her meal, showing no emotion despite the curious stares from nearby tables. Administrative summons were unusual, especially for first-year cadets who had barely begun their training. She nodded once and returned to her food, as the lieutenant commander moved on to other business. The rest of breakfast passed in a blur of whispered speculation from her table mates. Marcus Webb, a human cadet from the Luna colonies, leaned closer and spoke in a low voice. "Admin 7? That's where they handle security clearances and background investigations. You sure you didn't leave anything off your application?" Sarah shook her head, genuinely puzzled. Her application had been straightforward. Born on Earth, educated in the standard curriculum, no family military history, no special skills or connections. She was the definition of ordinary, which was exactly why she had been surprised to receive academy acceptance in the first place. Morning formation proceeded as usual, with Drill Sergeant Korath bellowing instructions to the assembled cadets. The massive Vorthon's voice could be heard across 3 training fields, and his reputation for turning soft civilians into disciplined soldiers was legendary throughout the academy. Sarah stood at attention with her company, her mind focused on the mysterious summons waiting for her. When formation dismissed, she made her way through the academy's winding corridors toward the administrative section. The building's architecture reflected its multi-species nature, with wide hallways to accommodate the larger alien species and adjustable lighting systems for those with different visual spectrums. Security checkpoints became more frequent as she approached the restricted areas, each one scanning her biometrics and confirming her authorization to proceed. Administrative Office 7 sat behind a heavy security door marked with warnings in 17 different languages. Sarah pressed her palm to the scanner and waited as the system verified her identity. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a sterile waiting area with a single desk occupied by a human clerk who looked up from his holographic displays. "Cadet Chen reporting as ordered," she said, standing at attention. The clerk, a middle-aged man with graying hair and tired eyes, consulted his screen before looking back at her. "Have a seat. Commander Torres will see you shortly. I'll need your identification codes for verification." Sarah rattled off the long string of numbers and letters that had been assigned to her upon birth, the same codes that tracked every citizen's movement and activities throughout the United Earth territories. The clerk entered them into his system, and his expression changed subtly as information began appearing on his screen. Minutes passed in silence before an inner door opened and Commander Elena Torres emerged. The human officer was tall and athletic, with short black hair and eyes that seemed to take in every detail of Sarah's appearance. She wore the uniform of Intelligence Division, with rank insignia that indicated significant authority within the Academy's command structure. "Cadet Chen, please come in," Commander Torres said, her voice neutral but commanding. Sarah followed her into an office that was notably sparse, just a desk, 2 chairs, and a secure terminal that hummed quietly in the corner. The walls were bare except for the United Earth flag and a star chart showing the current positions of known hostile forces. Commander Torres gestured for Sarah to sit before taking her own chair behind the desk. She studied Sarah for a long moment before speaking. "Tell me about your family background, Cadet. Specifically your parents and any relatives who might have served in military or government positions." Sarah straightened slightly, confused by the question. "My parents are both teachers, ma'am. My father teaches mathematics at a secondary school on Earth, and my mother works in early childhood education. I have no family military history that I'm aware of. My grandparents were farmers and small business owners." The commander nodded and turned to her terminal, entering commands that brought up what appeared to be an extensive file. The screen was angled away from Sarah, but she could see the reflection of scrolling text and official seals in the commander's eyes as she read. "Cadet Chen," Torres said after several minutes, "are you familiar with Classification Level 7 security protocols?" Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. Level 7 was among the highest security classifications in the United Earth, military reserved for information that could affect the survival of entire colonies or reveal critical weaknesses in their defenses against alien threats. "I've heard of them in our security briefings, ma'am, but I don't have any clearance beyond standard cadet level." Commander Torres leaned back in her chair, her expression unreadable. "That's about to change. What I'm going to tell you will alter your understanding of who you are and why you're really here at this academy. Everything you thought you knew about your background, your family, and your purpose is about to be challenged." The room seemed to grow smaller as Sarah waited for the revelation that would change everything. Outside, the academy continued its normal routine, but inside this secure office, the foundations of a cadet's world were about to crumble and reform into something entirely different. Commander Torres touched her terminal screen, bringing up a holographic display that materialized between them. The image showed a star map with dozens of red markers scattered across multiple sectors. Each marker pulsed ominously, indicating some form of threat or hostile activity. 23 years ago, Torres began, her voice taking on the tone of someone delivering a classified briefing. "The United Earth Intelligence Division discovered something that changed our understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy. We learned that we weren't just another species stumbling into galactic politics, we were the target of a systematic campaign to prevent human expansion." Sarah watched the holographic display shift to show shipping routes, communication networks, and what appeared to be surveillance data. The scope of the information was staggering, representing decades of intelligence gathering across multiple star systems. The Hegemony Coalition, which the public knows as a simple territorial dispute, is actually much more sinister. They've been studying human psychology, our military tactics, our social structures, and our technological development for over 50 years. Their goal isn't conquest, it's elimination. The display zoomed in on a particular sector where Earth's colonies were marked in blue. Surrounding them like a slowly tightening noose were the red markers indicating hegemony forces. The pattern was clear even to someone with basic tactical training. "But here's what makes this personal for you, Cadet Chen," Torres continued, calling up another file. "Your parents aren't teachers. Your father, David Chen, is actually Colonel David Chen, one of our most successful deep-cover intelligence operatives. Your mother, Dr. Lisa Chen, is a xenobiologist specializing in hegemony, physiology, and psychology." Sarah felt her world shifting beneath her. Every memory of her childhood, every conversation with her parents, every piece of her identity was suddenly thrown into question. "That's impossible. I would have known. They couldn't have hidden something like that from me for 18 years. Torres nodded understandingly. "The memory modification protocols we used were extremely sophisticated. Your parents volunteered for this assignment before you were born. They gave up their real lives, their careers, their identities to create the perfect cover story. They became exactly what they pretended to be, devoted teachers raising a normal daughter." The holographic display shifted again, showing surveillance footage of Sarah's childhood home, her school, her daily activities. Someone had been watching her entire life, documenting every moment, every decision, every interaction. You were raised as a control subject, Torres explained. We needed to understand how a human child would develop under completely normal circumstances, without any military influence or advanced training. Your reactions, your problem-solving methods, your social development, all of it has been studied and analyzed. Sarah's hands clenched into fists on her lap. So I'm some kind of experiment? My entire life has been a lie? Not a lie, Torres said firmly. An investment in humanity's future. Everything your parents did, every sacrifice they made was real. Their love for you is genuine, but there's more you need to understand. The commander stood and walked to the window, looking out at the training fields where cadets from dozens of species practiced combat maneuvers. 3 months ago, our deep cover operatives reported something alarming. The hegemony has developed weapons specifically designed to exploit human psychological weaknesses. They can turn our greatest strengths, our adaptability, our emotional connections, our willingness to sacrifice for others, into vulnerabilities. Sarah struggled to process the implications. What does this have to do with me? You represent something unique, Torres said, turning back to face her. A human who was raised without any artificial conditioning, without military indoctrination, without the psychological armor that we typically build into our soldiers. Yet you scored in the top percentile on every academy entrance exam. Your problem-solving abilities, your tactical thinking, your leadership potential, all of it developed naturally. The display changed once more, showing test scores, psychological profiles, and performance metrics. Sarah recognized some of the evaluations from her academy application process, but others appeared to be from much earlier in her life. We believe that you might be immune to the hegemony's psychological warfare techniques precisely because you weren't trained to resist them. Your natural human responses might be our key to understanding how to protect our entire species. Torres returned to her seat and leaned forward. But there's something else. Your genetic markers indicate that you belong to a specific human subgroup that has been systematically targeted by hegemony forces. Every colony attack, every missing research station, every accident involving human exploration vessels, they've all had one thing in common. The humans who were killed or captured shared certain genetic traits. Sarah felt a chill of recognition. The same traits I have. Exactly. The hegemony isn't just trying to stop human expansion. They're trying to eliminate specific bloodlines, specific genetic combinations that they consider dangerous to their long-term survival. Your DNA represents something that terrifies them. The weight of revelation was crushing. Everything Sarah had believed about herself, her family, her purpose was being rewritten in real time. Yet beneath the shock and confusion, she felt something else beginning to emerge. A burning curiosity about what made her so important. What happens now? She asked, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Torres smiled for the first time since the meeting began. Now you have a choice. You can request a memory wipe and return to your normal life as a cadet, never knowing any of this. Your parents would continue their cover, and you would graduate and serve in whatever capacity the academy assigns you. Or you can volunteer for a special assignment that will put you at the center of the most important mission in human history. You would work directly with Intelligence Division to understand why the hegemony fears humans like you, and how we can use that fear to protect every human colony in the galaxy. Sarah looked at the holographic display, which now showed images of human colonies, families, children, researchers, farmers, artists, all living their lives unaware of the threat growing around them. She thought about her parents who had sacrificed their identities to raise her. She thought about the cadets in the mess hall, training for a war they didn't fully understand. If I choose the special assignment, she said slowly, will I ever be able to have a normal life again? Torres's expression grew serious. Probably not. Once you're fully briefed on what we know about the hegemony's plans, there will be no going back. You'll become a target and everyone close to you will be in danger. But you'll also have the chance to save billions of lives. Sarah stood and walked to the window, looking down at the training fields where her fellow cadets continued their exercises. Among them, she could see Marcus and several others from her unit, following their instructor's commands with precision and dedication. They believed they were training to defend humanity against external threats, never suspecting that one of their classmates might hold the key to species survival. The choice before her was impossible and inevitable at the same time. Everything in her life had led to this moment, This decision that would determine not just her own future but potentially the fate of every human in the galaxy. She turned back to Commander Torres, her mind made up. I need to know something first. Are my parents safe? They're in the safest place possible, Torres replied. Still teaching, still living their cover lives, but with protection details that they don't even know about. If you accept this assignment, they'll never know what you've become unless absolutely necessary. Sarah nodded, understanding the implications. She would have to continue pretending to be the ordinary cadet they believed they had raised, while secretly working to uncover secrets that could reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. 2 weeks later, Sarah found herself in a part of the academy she never knew existed. Hidden beneath the main training complex, accessible only through a series of security checkpoints that scanned everything from her biometrics to her brain patterns, lay the Special Operations Research Division. The corridors here were different from the academy above, narrower, more sterile, with walls that seemed to absorb sound and footsteps that echoed strangely in the filtered air. Her new handler, Agent Rodriguez, was a compact woman with cybernetic implants along her temples and eyes that seemed to process information faster than humanly possible. She led Sarah through a maze of laboratories and briefing rooms where humans worked alongside the most advanced AI systems in the galaxy. Your first assignment is simple in concept but complex in execution, Rodriguez explained as they walked. We need you to attend regular classes, maintain your cover as an ordinary cadet, while secretly learning everything we know about hegemony psychology and tactics. They stopped outside a room marked only with a number and a biometric scanner. Inside, Sarah discovered what looked like a combination of classroom and medical facility, with neural interface chairs arranged around a central holographic projector. This is where you'll receive accelerated learning protocols, Rodriguez said. The technology allows us to download information directly into your long-term memory while you sleep. You'll wake up each morning knowing things you never learned, understanding concepts that would normally take years to master. Sarah approached one of the chairs cautiously. The neural interface crown looked like a combination of advanced medical equipment and something from a science fiction nightmare.
Is it safe?
Safer than what happens if the hegemony succeeds in their plans, Rodriguez replied. We've used this technology on dozens of operatives. There are some side effects. Occasional headaches, vivid dreams, moments where you might not be sure if a memory is real or implanted. But your brain will adapt. The first session was scheduled for that evening. Sarah spent the intervening hours attending normal classes, trying to maintain the facade of being just another cadet, while her mind raced with the implications of what she had learned. During tactical analysis class, she found herself seeing patterns in the instructor's examples that she had never noticed before. Combat theory made connections to psychological warfare that seemed obvious in hindsight. Marcus noticed her distraction during lunch. You've been weird since you got called to Admin 7, he said, picking at his protein paste. Everything okay? Sarah forced a smile, just stressed about upcoming evaluations. You know how it is. But maintaining the lie was harder than she had expected. Every conversation felt like a performance. Every casual moment with her fellow cadets reminded her of the gulf that now existed between her reality and theirs. They were training for a war they understood. She was preparing for a conflict that could determine whether humanity survived at all. That night, she lay in the neural interface chair as technicians attached monitoring leads to her temples and synchronized the learning protocol with her brain patterns. Rodriguez stood nearby, checking displays that tracked neural activity and information absorption rates. We're starting with basic hegemony history and social structure, Rodriguez explained. Tomorrow night we'll move on to their military organization, then their psychological warfare techniques. By the end of the week, you'll know more about their species than most of our senior intelligence analysts. The last thing Sarah remembered was the soft hum of the machinery beginning its work. Then she was drowning in alien memories, experiencing the universe through minds that thought in patterns completely different from human consciousness. She saw the hegemony homeworld through compound eyes that perceived colors beyond human vision. She felt the hierarchical social structures that governed there, species like physical pressure against her thoughts. She woke the next morning with knowledge. That felt like remembering something she had always known. The hegemony wasn't just another aggressive species seeking territory. They were driven by a biological imperative that made peaceful coexistence impossible. Their evolutionary history had hardwired them to eliminate potential threats before those threats could develop enough to challenge them. But humans represented something they had never encountered before. Other species they had conquered had been predictable, stronger or faster or more intelligent in specific ways, but ultimately limited by their biological nature. Humans were different. Human adaptability, creativity, and capacity for rapid technological advancement made them impossible to predict or contain. During morning formation, Sarah found herself analyzing Drill Sergeant Korath's instructions with new understanding. The Vorthon military traditions he demonstrated were based on hierarchical pack structures that made sense given their evolutionary background. But human military organization was fundamentally different, based on flexible command structures that could adapt to changing circumstances. In xenobiology class, she looked at her alien classmates with eyes informed by intelligence reports and psychological profiles. The Altarians' four-armed physiology made them excellent multitaskers, but limited their ability to focus intensively on single problems. The crystalline Zalari's light-based communication gave them perfect information sharing, but made them vulnerable to specific forms of electronic warfare. The knowledge was intoxicating and terrifying at the same time. She began to understand why the hegemony feared humans, and why that fear made them so dangerous. Agent Rodriguez found her after classes that day, conducting what appeared to be a routine inspection of cadet equipment, but was actually a covert briefing. "How are you adapting to the new information?" she asked while examining Sarah's tactical gear. "It's overwhelming," Sarah admitted quietly. "I keep seeing connections everywhere, analyzing everything through the lens of species psychology and military doctrine. I feel like I'm losing touch with who I used to be." Rodriguez nodded. "That's normal. The integration process affects everyone differently, but most operatives report feeling disconnected from their previous selves for the first few weeks. The important thing is to remember that this knowledge is a tool, not a replacement for your humanity." That evening brought another learning session, this time focused on hegemony military technology and tactics. Sarah experienced battles from the perspective of enemy commanders, understanding their strategic thinking, and identifying weaknesses that human forces could exploit. She learned about weapons that could turn human emotional bonds against them, psychological attacks that targeted specifically human vulnerabilities. But she also began to see patterns that the intelligence analysts had missed. The hegemony's greatest strength, their rigid hierarchical thinking, was also their greatest weakness. They couldn't adapt to truly unexpected responses because their entire culture was built around predictable authority structures. After 3 nights of neural downloading, Sarah felt like a different person wearing her own skin. She knew things that no cadet should know, understood threats that would give nightmares to experienced soldiers, yet she had to maintain her cover, pretending to struggle with basic combat theory while secretly analyzing alien military doctrine that could reshape the balance of galactic power. The real test came during a routine training exercise. The scenario involved defending a human colony against a generic alien attack, something every cadet had practiced dozens of times. But now Sarah could see the exercise through multiple lenses, understanding how different alien species would actually conduct such an attack, recognizing the psychological assumptions built into human defensive planning. When the simulation began, she found herself making decisions that surprised even her instructors. Instead of following standard defensive protocols, she organized her unit's response based on what she now knew about alien psychology and tactics. The result was so effective that Drill Sergeant Korath called a halt to the exercise early. "Cadet Chen," he rumbled in his deep voice, "explain your tactical reasoning." Sarah felt every eye in the training bay focused on her. She had to provide an explanation that would satisfy military instructors without revealing her special knowledge. "I considered what would happen if the attackers weren't following human tactical doctrine," she said carefully. "Different species might approach the problem differently, so I tried to adapt our response accordingly." The instructor nodded slowly. "Interesting perspective. Continue developing that line of thinking." As the other cadets filed out of the training bay, Sarah realized that her new knowledge was going to be harder to hide than she had anticipated. She was becoming someone different, someone whose capabilities would inevitably attract attention, And in a galaxy where humans were already considered a threat by hostile forces, standing out could be the most dangerous thing of all. The emergency alarm shattered the quiet of the Academy's pre-dawn hours, a sound that sent thousands of cadets scrambling from their bunks to emergency stations. Sarah woke instantly, her enhanced knowledge providing context that her fellow cadets lacked. This wasn't a drill. The alarm pattern indicated an actual threat, priority level 7, requiring immediate mobilization of all available personnel. She joined the flood of cadets rushing toward the main briefing hall, her heart racing as she spotted Agent Rodriguez among the Academy staff. The agent's grim expression confirmed Sarah's worst fears. Something had gone catastrophically wrong. Academy Commandant General Morrison took the podium, his weathered face grave under the harsh emergency lighting. Behind him, a massive holographic display showed a star map with a new red marker pulsing ominously in what had been neutral space just hours before. "Attention all personnel," Morrison began, his voice carrying the weight of command across the silent hall. "At 0347 hours, we lost contact with Research Station Omega 7. Long-range scans confirm the presence of hegemony forces in the system. This appears to be their first direct assault on a human scientific facility." Murmurs rippled through the assembled cadets and instructors. Research Station Omega 7 was known even to first-year students. It housed some of humanity's most advanced xenobiological research and was protected by a significant military garrison. If the hegemony had overwhelmed it, they were far more capable than public intelligence reports suggested. Sarah felt a chill as she realized the implications. The station's research included detailed studies of human psychology and biology, exactly the kind of information the hegemony would need to perfect their species-specific weapons. If they had captured that data, every human in the galaxy would be at risk. "All senior cadets will be deployed to support rescue and reconnaissance operations," Morrison continued. "This is not a training exercise. You will be working alongside active duty personnel in a combat zone. Some of you may not return." The hall erupted in nervous energy as cadets processed the reality of their situation. Most had joined the Academy expecting years of training before facing real combat. Now they were being thrust into active warfare against an enemy that specifically targeted their species. Sarah caught Agent Rodriguez's eye across the hall and saw a subtle nod toward one of the side exits. She waited until the initial briefings began, then slipped away from her unit and made her way to the designated meeting point, a supply closet that had been converted into a secure communication station. "The situation is worse than the Commandant indicated," Rodriguez said without preamble. "Omega 7 wasn't just attacked, it was infiltrated. Our intelligence suggests they had inside help, possibly from compromised personnel who didn't know they were being manipulated." Sarah understood immediately. The psychological warfare techniques. "They've been tested on humans already." "Exactly. We have reports of research staff acting erratically in the weeks before the attack, making decisions that compromised security protocols. The hegemony may have found a way to influence human behavior without direct contact." Rodriguez activated a small holographic projector, showing detailed intelligence reports that painted a terrifying picture. The attack on Omega 7 had been surgically precise, targeting specific research areas while avoiding others. The enemy knew exactly what they were looking for. "Your mission is different from the other cadets," Rodriguez continued. "While they're focused on rescue operations, you'll be part of a special intelligence team investigating how the hegemony gained such detailed knowledge of the station's layout and defenses." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. "What if I'm not ready? I've only had a week of enhanced training." "You're more ready than you realize," Rodriguez replied. "The psychological profiles indicate that you process stress and uncertainty better than most experienced operatives. Your natural responses aren't clouded by years of military conditioning that the hegemony has learned to exploit." An hour later, Sarah found herself aboard a military transport ship, surrounded by senior cadets and active duty personnel, preparing for what could be their final mission. The ship's atmosphere recyclers hummed constantly, working to maintain breathable air for the mixed crew of humans and allied alien species. Marcus sat across from her, checking and rechecking his equipment with nervous energy. "I can't believe this is really happening," he said. "Yesterday we were worried about passing tactical theory, and now we're heading into actual combat." Sarah nodded, but her mind was focused on the intelligence briefing Rodriguez had provided. The hegemony forces at Omega-7 weren't just there to destroy human research. They were conducting their own experiments, using captured human personnel to test their psychological warfare techniques in real time. Captain Elena Vasquez, their mission commander, called the team together for final briefings. She was a veteran of border conflicts with hegemony forces, her uniform bearing decorations that spoke of battles fought in the dark spaces between stars. "Listen carefully," Vasquez began, her voice cutting through the ship's background noise. "What we're facing isn't just a military attack. Intelligence reports suggest the hegemony has developed new weapons specifically designed to exploit human psychological weaknesses. They can turn our emotions, our loyalty, our protective instincts against us." She activated a tactical display showing the research station's layout. "Some of the personnel we're supposed to rescue may be compromised. They might fight us, try to sabotage our mission, or lead us into traps, all while believing they're acting in humanity's best interests." The implications hit the assembled team like a physical blow. They weren't just facing an external enemy. They were confronting the possibility that humans themselves could be turned into unwitting weapons against their own species. "How do we know who to trust?" asked Lieutenant Park, a communications specialist who would be coordinating rescue operations. Vasquez's expression grew grim. "We don't. That's why this mission is so dangerous. We'll be operating under the assumption that anyone we encounter could be compromised, including members of our own team." Sarah felt the enhanced knowledge from her neural downloads clicking into place, providing context for the captain's warnings. The hegemony's psychological warfare wasn't crude mind control. It was subtle manipulation that worked by amplifying existing human emotions and instincts. A person under their influence would genuinely believe they were making the right choices while unknowingly serving enemy objectives. As the transport ship approached the research station, long-range sensors began providing detailed scans of the facility. What they revealed was disturbing. The station appeared to be fully operational, with normal power signatures and life support systems. If not for the hegemony ships maintaining position nearby, it would look like nothing had happened. Tactical analysis suggests the station wasn't conquered through force, reported the ship's AI system. All defensive systems remain intact, and there are no signs of structural damage from weapons fire. Captain Vasquez studied the data with growing concern. They were invited in. Someone opened the doors and welcomed them aboard. Sarah realized that this was exactly what her training had prepared her for. A situation where normal military thinking would be inadequate, where understanding alien psychology would be crucial to survival. The hegemony hadn't captured Omega-7 through superior firepower. They had turned the station's own personnel against themselves. As they prepared to dock with the research facility, Sarah checked her equipment one final time. Hidden among her standard gear was a neural scanner provided by Agent Rodriguez, a device that could detect the subtle brain pattern changes associated with hegemony psychological manipulation. It might be the only way to distinguish between genuine human allies and compromised personnel. The transport's docking clamps engaged with a metallic clang that echoed through the ship's hull. Beyond the airlock waited a space station that looked normal but had become something far more sinister, a laboratory where humanity's greatest fear was being tested and refined. Sarah took a deep breath and prepared to enter an environment where her enhanced knowledge would either save lives or get everyone killed. The real test of her abilities was about to begin, and failure would mean more than just her own death. It could provide the hegemony with the final pieces they needed to destroy human civilization entirely. The airlock hissed open to reveal Research Station Omega-7's main corridor, and what Sarah saw defied every expectation. The hallway was pristine, well-lit, and showed no signs of battle or forced entry. Soft music played from hidden speakers, and the air carried the familiar scent of recycled atmosphere, mixed with the faint aroma of coffee from the station's commissary. Captain Vasquez led the team forward, weapons ready but encountering nothing more threatening than normal station operations. They passed laboratories where equipment hummed quietly, living quarters with personal belongings arranged exactly as their owners had left them, and common areas that looked like they had been abandoned mid-conversation rather than evacuated during an attack. "This is wrong," Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible through his helmet communicator. "Where is everyone?" Sarah consulted her neural scanner, watching for the telltale patterns that would indicate hegemony's psychological manipulation. The device remained silent, showing normal baseline readings for the empty corridors. Whatever had happened here, it hadn't left obvious traces in the station's electromagnetic patterns. They reached the main laboratory complex without encountering a single person, living or dead. The security doors stood open, their electronic locks displaying green access lights as if welcoming visitors. Inside, Sarah could see research equipment still running, holographic displays showing ongoing experiments, and workstations with half-finished reports still glowing on their screens. "Team 1, this is Captain Vasquez," she spoke into her communicator. "We've reached Lab Section 7. No contact with station personnel. Everything appears normal except for the complete absence of human presence." The response crackled back from the transport ship. "Acknowledged, Captain. Be advised that our scans are detecting life signs in the station's central hub. Approximately 40 individuals, all human biosignatures, all apparently healthy." Sarah felt her enhanced knowledge providing context for what they were discovering. The hegemony's psychological warfare techniques were designed to be subtle, working through suggestion and emotional manipulation rather than obvious coercion. If they had successfully compromised the station's personnel, those people would be going about their normal routines while unconsciously serving enemy objectives. They made their way toward the central hub, following emergency lighting strips that guided them through corridors that felt increasingly surreal. Sarah noticed details that her enhanced training flagged as significant. Security cameras that had been subtly repositioned, access panels that showed signs of recent modification, and air circulation patterns that didn't match the station's original specifications. "Captain," she said quietly, "I think the station has been systematically altered. Someone has been modifying the infrastructure, but doing it gradually to avoid triggering security alerts." Vasquez stopped and examined the access panel Sarah indicated. Her expression grew troubled as she recognized the implications. Sabotage from the inside, conducted by people who didn't realize they were sabotaging anything. They reached the central hub to find a scene that was both normal and deeply disturbing. 43 research personnel were going about their daily activities with perfect calm and efficiency. Scientists reviewed data at their workstations, technicians maintained equipment, and administrative staff processed reports exactly as they would during any normal duty shift. But there were no guards, no security protocols in effect, and no apparent awareness that their station was surrounded by enemy forces. When Captain Vasquez's team entered the hub, the personnel looked up with friendly curiosity, rather than the relief or concern that would be expected from people who had been under siege. "Good morning," said Dr. Patricia Williams, the station's chief researcher, approaching them with a warm smile. "Are you here for the scheduled inspection? I'm afraid we weren't expecting you quite so early." Sarah's neural scanner began registering subtle anomalies in the electromagnetic patterns around Dr. Williams. The readings weren't dramatic enough to indicate direct mental control, but they suggested alterations in brain activity consistent with the psychological manipulation techniques she had learned about. Captain Vasquez maintained her military bearing while responding. "Dr. Williams, we're here in response to the emergency signal from your station. Are you aware that you're currently surrounded by hegemony forces?" Dr. Williams looked genuinely puzzled. "Hegemony forces? I'm afraid there must be some mistake. We're conducting routine research operations. I would certainly know if there were any hostile forces in the area." The other personnel nodded in agreement, their expressions showing no signs of deception or coercion. They genuinely believed everything was normal, despite evidence that should have been impossible to ignore. Sarah stepped forward, her enhanced knowledge suggesting an approach that conventional military thinking would have missed. "Dr. Williams, could you show us your recent research data? We're particularly interested in any studies involving human psychological responses to external stimuli." The scientist's face lit up with enthusiasm. "Oh, absolutely. We've made some fascinating discoveries about human adaptability under stress. Our recent experiments have shown that people can be guided toward optimal decision-making through very subtle environmental modifications." As Dr. Williams led them toward her primary workstation, Sarah realized with growing horror what had happened. The hegemony hadn't captured the station through force or obvious coercion. They had convinced the research staff that they were conducting voluntary experiments in human psychology, while actually perfecting techniques for large-scale manipulation. The data displays showed weeks of research into human behavioral patterns, stress responses, and decision-making processes. But the experimental parameters weren't designed to help humans. They were creating a blueprint for psychological warfare that could be deployed against entire populations. We've been working with some fascinating consultants, Dr. Williams continued, bringing up holographic records of research sessions. They've provided insights into human psychology that we never would have discovered on our own. Sarah's scanner was now detecting clear evidence of neural manipulation throughout the research complex. The hegemony hadn't needed to conquer the station. They had convinced its personnel to willingly participate in their own psychological dissection. Captain Vasquez's voice was tight with controlled anger as she spoke into her communicator. Team 2, this is Captain Vasquez. The station personnel are alive but compromised. They've been conducting psychological warfare research under the belief that it's voluntary scientific study. The response from the transport ship carried new urgency. Captain, our long-range sensors are detecting hegemony ships moving to intercept additional human vessels. Whatever they've learned at Omega-7, they're preparing to use it. Sarah realized that the research station had become a testing ground for weapons that could be deployed against any human population. The scientists working around them had unknowingly provided their enemies with detailed maps of human psychological vulnerabilities. But her enhanced knowledge also suggested a possibility that conventional military thinking would have missed. If the hegemony's techniques relied on subtle manipulation rather than direct control, they might be vulnerable to someone who understood their methods and could resist their influence. Captain, she said quietly, I think there might be a way to turn this situation around. If we can understand exactly how they're manipulating the station personnel, we might be able to reverse the process. Vasquez looked at her with sharp interest. Explain. The psychological manipulation works by amplifying existing human instincts and emotions. But if someone understands the technique and can recognize when it's being used, they might be able to resist it. More importantly, they might be able to use the same methods against the hegemony forces. It was a desperate plan, but as alarms began sounding throughout the station and hegemony ships moved closer to their position, desperation might be their only option. Sarah prepared to put her enhanced knowledge to the ultimate test, knowing that failure would give their enemies everything they needed to destroy human civilization. Sarah stood in the station's primary data core, surrounded by screens displaying months of psychological research that the hegemony had manipulated human scientists into conducting. Her enhanced knowledge allowed her to see patterns that conventional analysis would have missed. The alien psychological warfare techniques weren't just sophisticated, they were specifically designed to exploit humanity's greatest strengths and turn them into weaknesses. But in studying these techniques so carefully, the hegemony had revealed something they hadn't intended. Sarah could see the underlying structure of their own psychology, the rigid hierarchical thinking that made their species so effective at organized warfare, but also predictable in ways they didn't realize. Captain, she called to Vasquez, who was coordinating with their transport ship while monitoring hegemony fleet movements. I think I understand how to reverse what they've done here. The station around them was beginning to show signs of the approaching crisis. Emergency lights flashed in corridors as automatic systems detected the nearby enemy ships, but the compromised personnel continued their work with disturbing calm. Convinced that everything was proceeding according to plan, Sarah accessed the station's communication array and began implementing a strategy that combined everything she had learned about both human and hegemony psychology. Instead of trying to break the manipulation directly, she would use the enemy's own techniques against them. The hegemony's control over the station personnel works by convincing them that they're making rational choices, she explained to Captain Vasquez. But their methods rely on the subjects not understanding what's happening to them. If I can make the manipulation obvious, their natural human skepticism should reassert itself. She began broadcasting subtle audio frequencies throughout the station, patterns designed to disrupt the hegemony's psychological conditioning. But instead of using human countermeasures, she employed techniques based on hegemony social psychology, commands and suggestions that would be naturally compelling to the alien mindset. but would seem obviously foreign to human consciousness. The effect was almost immediate. Dr. Williams looked up from her workstation with confusion, blinking as if waking from a dream. What have we been doing?" she asked, staring at the research data with growing horror. Throughout the hub, other personnel began showing signs of emerging from their induced compliance. Years of scientific training reasserted itself as they recognized the obvious signs of psychological manipulation in their recent work. "Dr. Williams," Sarah said urgently, "we need your help to turn this research against the hegemony forces. Can you modify the psychological warfare techniques to work on their species instead of ours?" The scientist's expression hardened with determination and anger as she fully grasped what had been done to her and her team. "They made us weapons against our own people. Yes, we can absolutely turn this around." Working with desperate efficiency, the research team began modifying their equipment to broadcast psychological warfare signals designed specifically for hegemony neural patterns. Sarah's enhanced knowledge provided crucial insights into alien psychology, while the station's legitimate researchers contributed their expertise in signal processing and neural manipulation. Captain Vasquez coordinated their efforts while monitoring the approaching enemy fleet. "Hegemony ships will be in weapons range in 12 minutes, she reported. "Whatever you're planning, it needs to work fast." Sarah activated the modified psychological warfare system just as the first hegemony vessels came within range. Instead of physical weapons, they deployed something far more devastating, signals that exploited the rigid hierarchical thinking that governed alien society. The hegemony commanders found themselves receiving what appeared to be legitimate orders from higher authority, commands that seemed perfectly reasonable within their cultural context, but were actually designed to create chaos within their fleet organization. Ship captains began questioning their mission parameters. Communications officers started reporting contradictory instructions, and tactical coordinators found themselves unable to coordinate effective attacks. "It's working," Dr. Williams reported, monitoring the hegemony fleet's communications. "Their command structure is breaking down. They can't distinguish between real orders and the false signals we're broadcasting." But Sarah realized they had only bought themselves temporary breathing room. The hegemony would eventually recognize what was happening and adapt their tactics. The real solution required something more permanent. "We need to get this information back to Earth," she told Captain Vasquez. "Not just the psychological warfare techniques, but the complete psychological profile of the hegemony species. If we understand how they think, we can predict their strategies and develop permanent countermeasures." Vasquez nodded grimly. "The transport is standing by for immediate departure. Can you download all the research data?" "Better than that," Sarah replied. "I can integrate it with my neural enhancement protocols. I'll become a living repository of everything we've learned about hegemony psychology and their countermeasures to human tactics." It was a dangerous decision. Adding so much alien psychological data to her already enhanced mind could result in permanent personality changes or even mental breakdown. But as she watched the hegemony fleet struggling to reorganize itself, she knew it was their only chance to prevent this scenario from being repeated at every human colony in the galaxy. The neural integration process began as their transport ship undocked from the research station. Sarah felt alien thought patterns mixing with her human consciousness, creating a mental framework that could process both human creativity and hegemony strategic thinking. The sensation was disorienting and occasionally painful, but it also provided insights that no pure human or alien mind could achieve. When the process was complete, Sarah possessed something unique in the galaxy, a consciousness that could think like both species simultaneously. She could predict hegemony strategies because she understood their psychological limitations, while retaining the human adaptability that made those predictions useful. "Status report," Captain Vasquez requested as they jumped to hyperspace, leaving the confused hegemony fleet behind. Sarah looked up from the neural interface chair, her eyes reflecting a new depth of understanding. "The hegemony isn't just afraid of human adaptability," she said. "They're terrified of it because they can't adapt themselves. Their entire species is locked into rigid thinking patterns that make them incredibly effective within known parameters, but helpless when faced with truly unexpected situations." She activated a holographic display showing galactic strategic maps enhanced with psychological analysis. They've been trying to eliminate humans not because we're militarily superior, but because our mere existence proves that their worldview is incomplete. If other species realize that adaptation and creativity are possible, the hegemony's entire social structure would collapse. Marcus, who had remained silent throughout the mission, finally spoke up. "So what happens now?" Sarah smiled, and for the first time since learning about her true purpose, she felt genuinely optimistic about humanity's future. "Now we do what humans do best. We adapt, we learn, and we become something our enemies never expected. The hegemony thought they could use our psychology against us, but they just taught us how to use their psychology against them." As their ship raced toward Earth with data that would reshape humanity's understanding of galactic warfare, Sarah began composing the first reports that would establish her as the galaxy's foremost expert on interspecies psychological conflict. She was no longer just another cadet. She had become something entirely new, a bridge between human intuition and alien logic that would give her species the tools they needed to not just survive, but thrive among the stars. The hegemony had spent decades studying humanity's weaknesses, never realizing they were actually documenting the very adaptability that would ultimately defeat them. In trying to turn humans into weapons against themselves, they had created exactly the kind of innovative thinking that their own rigid psychology could never counter. Sarah Chen, who had started as an ordinary cadet, hiding extraordinary potential, had become humanity's secret weapon in a war that would determine the future of both species. And for the first time since learning about the galaxy's true dangers, she was confident that humanity would not just survive. They would show the universe what it truly meant to adapt and overcome.